My first memory would be from the elementary school, going to the library. I knew the library was there, and my mother took me, but the teachers at the Central School, it was called Central School then and still is, would take us on an outing, and we would march up Academy Street by all the houses and up the hill and into the library. And the library was Louise Leib. She was an extraordinary, well-chosen person to do the library. She was retired. She was a relative to the Burley family. And we not only read books that she recommended, but after we came back, she discussed it with us. Did you like it? Did you like best? That's the first time I ever read Shakespeare. Yep. And the entrance when you walk in, the hallway, and then up those long steps of stairs. They're not a full flight, but boy, they sure give you time to think it over as to where you're going. You may be going halfway to heaven, if not all the way, right? It was like going into a palatial palace. It's a domed roof, wide open with important illustrative portraits of people, and you just knew that they had to be terribly important. I mean, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, it's amazing. And it was a huge room with a lovely big side room on the side where there were loads of magazines and periodicals. There wasn't an open space on the shelves or on the tables. It was a wonderful collection. And old books, wonderful old books. And so that grew into a committee that became the Jewett Eastman Committee. Amy Schramm talked me into being on the committee when I moved back into town. And it was hard to deny Amy. I don't know if you knew her, but she was enthusiastic, and her enthusiasm encompassed us. Called the Eastman House because at that time the Eastmans owned it. So they still call it the Jewett Eastman House. The Jewetts moved Sarah into that house, her mother and father, because it got to be too much for the grandparents in the one big house. You probably know all this. No. And Dr. Jewett moved his practice and his family into the new house that they built in the 1850s. We've lost our inner space, which is a negative, but we had open space where the children had a very tiny room. Do you remember where the computer is now? That was the children's room. And that big room that is dedicated to Carolyn Bluen, who was on the original committee and whose name I couldn't think of. It was Carolyn was a feisty, dependable, good leader. And I think it's a wonderful one to. I can't say that it's the best, but I think it would have been a shame not to consider it because it was a church. It's a good thing. Look at the people that have barns, and they make houses out of them. They're wise in using the structure that you've got. You've got a good structure.
1987, we were up here, and I was using the library and saw an ad that Kitty was leaving, and applied, and was there for almost 21 years. Well, when I first started, I tried to get it a little more modernized, a little bit, and put things in, a little more professionally set up. At that point, it was getting the word out that there actually was a library, even though it had been there for quite a while. But the Friends, that was one of their missions, was to, publicize it, because people, it was small and it was relatively new. And
how could you expect to have a wonderful town without offering the people in the town the option to have an access to written materials that they could read, enjoy, bring their children up with? How could you possibly even consider that? And what kind of a town are you going to build if you have that type of an option, which is no option at all?